Hi everyone. Today I'm making my comeback after a long absence with a remake of my very first video, Top 100 Wano Arc Characters in One Piece. Before we continue, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also follow me on TikTok, Extremista Jack, Beansmoke Jackasop. We have a lot of fun over there. Enjoy! Let's start with the explanations. Pour mes amis en français, mettez la traduction de la vidéo. Why is Daifuku ranked so low? You have to look at Sanji's power scaling between Whole Cake and Onigashima. In Wano, Sanji struggles against the Toby Roppo. He has trouble gaining the upper hand against Hybrid Page 1, even with the raid suit, struggles in base form against Drake in dinosaur form, and he even completely bypasses Kanjuro's hacks. Whereas against Oven in Whole Cake, he outclassed him in every aspect. Oven, who is narratively equivalent to Daifuku, ends up through Sanji, below a Toby Roppo in animal form. Because raid suit Sanji is stronger than Whole Cake Sanji, that's obvious. Moreover, some people will say that Daifuku is stronger than Oven, which is false narratively, but also because Sanji was weaker during the wedding and wasn't going all out against Daifuku. As for Nami, it's quite simple. I placed her low Toby Roppo because narratively, she defeated a Toby Roppo, but one who was nerfed, so symbolically I put her here.
二刀流握り灯籠
For Hawkins, in terms of portrayal, he has to be below the Toby Rappo since he's a headliner. This also lines up with his feats. His best technique was one shot by pre-Wano Zoro or by Killer, and without his hacks, he remains fairly vulnerable. I ranked Brook above Chopper because Brook one-shot a number along with 3 gifters, something only characters like Base Frankie, Maha, or Yamato are capable of. Chopper, on the other hand, is quite featless. He's hard to scale, especially considering that Queen was basically trolling while fighting him. I put Kinnaman above Kanjuro, because even if Kanjuro's hacks can be annoying, Kinnaman is martially superior and has shown it. Also, even though I didn't explicitly mention it, I place base Nekomamushi above Perospero, because first of all, Nekomamushi was nerfed, and secondly, Perospero's hacks was working in his favor, yet Nekomamushi is martially superior. On top of that, Perospero himself says that he would have lost against Sulong Carrot and Wanda, and it's just common sense to say that base Nekomamushi is superior to both Sulongs.
Luffy 海賊王になる男だ。
ああ、海賊王になるのはカイドウ様に決まってんだろ。のでんかち割れろ。ブレスガン。
Ulti is the Toby Rappo who stood out the most. That's true. Nevertheless, her feats are a bit overrated. She does fight evenly with Yamato, yes, but a Yamato without advanced Conqueror's haki. The fact that she's a Toby Rappo means she isn't as strong as people tend to think. And by extension, Big Mom's attack on her isn't as powerful as it's often made out to be either. For Apu, I initially thought he was limited by his portrayal since he wasn't a Toby Rappo. But in reality, that's not the case. He has incredible feats against Luffy, Zoro, and Kid. He easily withstands Guernica and Zoro's attack. In short, in terms of feats, he outclasses all the Tobirappo. As for Kawamatsu, he doesn't really have standout feats, but he's stated to be on the same level as Denjiro and Ashura Doji, according to Kinemon. The issue is that Kinemon is referring to Kawamatsu from 20 years ago, and nothing tells us that this statement couldn't have changed. However, narratively and factually, nothing contradicts it, so I place him here. Calm down. I'm going to explain everything before you drop a negative opinion. Let's start with Jack. Yes, Inuarashi defeated him fairly, but both of them were heavily nerfed and one hit away from going down, so it basically comes down to who strikes first. Especially since, in terms of durability, the manga makes it clear that they're on the same level during their final clash. Jack, therefore, has a much bigger disadvantage because his greatest strength, his durability, is at its lowest. A full-power hybrid Jack is therefore martially stronger. Now let's talk about Marco, which will shock a lot of people. First of all, I want to say that Marco is no longer in his prime, having been inactive for over a year. So I'm not talking about Marineford Marco, who was clearly much stronger. Let's focus on his feats on Onigashima. Yes, Big Mom said she couldn't gain the upper hand against him, but that's because Prometheus's fire is weaker than Marco's flames. Big Mom is talking about Prometheus here, not Marco's overall power. They clash evenly through hacks. Next, there's a huge misconception about Marco versus King and Queen. First of all, Marco only had one real scene fighting King and Queen at the same time, and even then it was base King and Queen not in hybrid form, and he dealt them almost no damage. Then, a few chapters later, Queen was mainly dealing with Chopper, meaning King was fighting Marco one-on-one for several chapters. Sure, Marco had already fought Big Mom and was healing allies at the same time as he was fighting, but King was still in base form and wasn't using his Lunarian powers. And King beat Marco, partly through stamina, but Marco was bleeding while base King was completely intact. The fight happened off-screen, yes, but narratively speaking, King had no reason to use his Lunarian abilities during that fight, whereas he brings them out against Zoro for the first real time. Another point worth adding is that Queen used his hybrid form against Sanji instead of against Marco, which means Queen considered pre-Ifrit Sanji a bigger threat than Marco, who was healing while fighting. The same logic applies to Zoro. In short, what you need to take away is that a slightly nerfed healing Onigashima Marco is clearly weaker than base King, who sits at a low commander level. Therefore, a fully healthy Onigashima Marco cannot be much stronger than base King, who himself is close to hybrid Jack and dinosaur form Queen. Don't come at me, Marco fans. I'm just trying to be as objective as possible. With that said, let's move on to the top 20.
だけど僕は言ったんだ。言いたいことを。悔いはない。
Once again, don't get mad. If I'm placing Shanks' officers here, it's because Shanks has the most balanced crew. And Brand New isn't talking about bounties here. This is further reinforced by the fact that Shanks has a very weak fleet compared to the other Yonko. In addition to the crew statement, Ben Beckman is also said to be close in strength to his captain, so I placed him here. I'm also not talking about Prime Big Mom, but about current Big Mom with Advanced Conqueror's Haki, which she didn't use against Kid and Law. Finally, narratively speaking, it makes sense to say that Shanks is stronger than Kaido, and that Luffy would have lost to Kaido in a one-on-one, most likely due to stamina. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. See you soon on YouTube, and also on TikTok, where I'm more active. Bye-bye!